Okay. Hi, everybody. Hopefully that's coming through okay now. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and we are going to get started. Thank you all for joining Amy and I on our special bonus episode of Farm Business Foundation. So what we found out is that you guys were asking so many great questions and we just didn't have enough time to get to those. And these were questions that popped up in the pre-course survey as well as the after course evaluations. So we picked the ones that were kind of common or lots of people had the same questions, and we're going to go through those tonight. So these are in no fancy order at all, just as a forewarning as well. Go ahead. All right. There we go. Okay, so this is our special bonus episode, like I mentioned. As you all have heard this before, I just want to mention that this series is funded through a grant from American Farmland Trust, Farmland for a New Generation, New York. Their support helped to make this possible, as well as Cornell University's New York Dairy and Livestock Risk Management Education Project. My name is Katelyn Walley-Stoll, and I have been coordinating this workshop series along with my colleague here, Amy Barkley. This is my contact information. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or concerns, especially because this series is an introduction, not an entire how-to guide to start farming. So that is what we are here for. Okay, just some housekeeping. This is the last workshop as part of this series. We do have an evaluation going out at the end of this workshop and tomorrow that looks at the entire course. So since this is funded by a couple of folks, we want to get some really good feedback based on the effectiveness of this workshop, but then also how we can make it better in the future and other topics that you are interested in learning more about in the future. So tomorrow, you guys are going to be getting the evaluation link. Please fill it out by Friday, June 11th. And 3 people will be selected to get a $10 Tim Hortons gift card. And then, we'll get that on right here. Yep. Everybody who fills it out will get a really cool No Farms, No Food bumper sticker if you don't already have one. And whatever other fun stuff I can find in the office and fit into an envelope. The other thing that's going to be headed your way is a link for a central location of all of the recordings, the slides, and the follow-up resources. It's going to be in something called Cornell Box, which is pretty similar to Dropbox if you've ever used that before. So it'll be a one-stop shop for everything that you need from this series. All of these videos are currently posted on YouTube through a private link, so please don't share that out since they're not edited, but then as time allows, we'll make fancier versions of them that are edited that you can then share and pass them on to your friends and your cousins and everybody else you're trying to convince to farm with you. Okay, so today our agenda, our objectives, we are here to answer your questions in a very unorganized manner. So like I said, we went through the evaluations and picked out some of the topics that kept occurring. We'll go through those first. And then, if you have questions as we go through them or questions that we didn't cover, please feel free to ask those as well. So this workshop purely is just for you guys and for your knowledge. Okay, let's jump right in. So by far, one of the topics that came up the most was generating startup capital. How do I find money to start a farm? The best answer is your own cash, right? And this means no loans, no home equity, no borrowing money from friends, no credit cards. Using your own cash is the best way to start a farm. Now, how many of us have a bucket of cash out back to start our own farm, right? Not too many. the advantage of starting with your own money is that then you're not trying to leverage something to start your dream, right? If farming is your dream. It's worth the patience if you are in a situation that you can do this, to try to save up at least some of your own cash. You know, some advantages of this is that it makes it so you have to be super scrappy while you're farming and very lean and efficient. But then, you know, it also is going to help you be more successful once you do get going, because you're not trying to pay off debt at the same time you are trying to run a farm business. Most farms, from data that we're able to collect, actually have started their farm with less than $5,000 in operating cash. So a caveat to that is that usually those startups don't include land, right? So they're renting land, they have land that they are borrowing from a family member, they already own something. That $5,000 cash isn't trying to pay off a mortgage, it's just trying to pay off that farm's day-to-day bills. As you guys can tell, continuing saga, still struggling with my voice, so I apologize for that right up front here. Okay, so if possible, if it's not necessarily needed, if you can find ways around it, going along with that, starting with the least amount of debt possible, is you can avoid purchasing land. So a lot of people get really grumpy at me when I suggest this, but avoiding the expense of that land greatly reduces your need for startup capital. So if you don't have money saved up to buy land, you know, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you go and you find capital someplace else and all of it's going to buy the land. How are you going to have enough money to build barns, take care of animals, purchase access to markets and things like that? So what we look at in those situations are things like rental agreements, lease agreements, reconfiguring, choosing an enterprise that maybe takes less space, takes up less land. And so by starting up your new farm, it's going to be easier for you to generate startup capital if you're not trying to meet a mortgage payment as well. A good kind of rule of thumb that we talk about when we're building budgets to start a farm is that no more than 50% of your startup capital should be spent on land. So a lot of times that's not the case, but that's a good rule of thumb. Okay, hold on one second here. We've got somebody that's trying to join that's having some issues. Okay, so next option, if you don't have a wheelbarrow full of cash, if you absolutely positively have to, hey, Amy, could you talk a little bit about loans for a second, as much as you can, or just generally stall for a second?
Yeah, sure. So only if you need to should you take out loans. And the reason for that is, as we all know, while you're getting a large sum of cash up front to sponsor your enterprise, you're also going to have to pay somebody back for that, whether it's a bank, whether it's your friend, whether it's your neighbor. And that has to be done in a timely manner. So not only are you paying back a loan to somebody and likely paying back interest, which is taking a chunk out of your profits further down the line, you're also trying to juggle making enough profit during your growing season to then pay off that loan. So that, in my eyes, is the trickiest part about loans. Yeah, and unfortunately, that's all I really know about them. I don't work too much with loans here in livestock specialist land.
Oh, you did great. Thank you, Amy. Okay, so options for loans. There's kind of two different buckets for loans. The one is ag specific loans, and then the other one is commercial credit loans. The advantage of ag specific loans is that when you're going to these providers, you're not trying to explain why you need to buy 5 goats, right? They already know why you need to buy 5 goats and what you're planning to do with them. So examples of traditional or ag specific loans that we have available to us are, and the largest that most people use to get started are through the Farm Service Agency. So if you remember on workshop 2, we had Emily Miller from the USDA office. She's the executive director at the Cattaraugus County USDA office. She she's part of the organization that helps to facilitate these loans. So Farm Service Agency offers 2 different types of loans that can be used to start a farm to generate your startup capital. The first one is a beginning farmer and rancher program. This one is the largest by far. It's really meant to purchase buildings, purchase equipment, purchase land. There's a lot of stipulations that come along with that, and it's a very long process that I'm not going to spend the whole hour of our night talking about. So the next option, if you're not looking for that huge of a loan, is the USDA microloan. These are loans in less of $50,000. So some people do use these loans to start a farm, but you might be renting land, you might already own land, and maybe you just need to buy some equipment or some processing things or some tools. Okay, so those are kind of our ag specific loans. Now, the hybrid of the two is that there are commercial banks in our region that have ag specific lenders. So they're familiar with working with farms. The largest one that most people work with is Farm Credit. Farm Credit East is our branch. They are a commercial bank, but are solely focused on agriculture. We also have M&T Community Bank, Bank of Finger Lakes, Bank of Castile, and CCB all are familiar with ag loans. That doesn't mean that if you go to a different bank, you can't get a loan from them. It just means that these guys are familiar with it and have a specific person that deals specifically with farm lending. And then there's also something called micro enterprise loan funds. You hear a lot about these with startups. So things like Kivazip. I'm not expecting you to remember that, but what these are is it's kind of like a GoFundMe for entrepreneurs, except for you have to pay the money back. So they are micro investors, funds that people can put money into. You can borrow based on your story and what you're trying to do. I've never worked with a farm that was successful going that route, but I did want to throw it out because it is obviously an option. Okay, next is investors. So there still is such a thing as slow money, and depending on your ideas and how big of a go-getter you are and what you're looking to do, it's an option to have investors invest in your farm. Okay, let me just see one more time. Sorry, we're having a couple of connectivity issues, so just trying to coordinate those. Okay. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on investors because, again, it's a tough gambit, but it's there. Next is residential finance. This is using your own equity. So depending on what stage of your life you're in, maybe you own a house that you could borrow against, maybe you have excellent credit that you can just go to the bank and get a regular commercial loan out. Don't even mention to them that you're using it to buy a farm or buy goats or buy sheep. This is an option. I've worked with farms that have gone this route when they've done career changes or when they're getting ready for retirement. So they get a line of equity out on their house, and that's what they use to purchase their farm supplies to start kind of their second career of farming. So I think a lot of times, if you're from the farm world, you only hear about loans from USDA and FSA, and that's not entirely true. So you can just go get a loan like an everyday person. It doesn't have to be an ag specific loan. So talking about the FSA stands for Farm Service Agency. This agency offers farm loans to meet a wide range of farmer needs. And our local FSA office for the Southwest New York corner, our officer is Amanda Ritchie. She actually covers chunks of all of the Southwest New York counties. So her contact information will be in your slides. But if you go to this fsa.usda.gov, you can connect with whoever is actually in your area. This kind of gives you an overview of all the different FSA loan types. They actually have a youth loan, which is something that, for example, myself and my brothers all participated in when we were growing up. It helped to build us credit, taught us how to not blow our money on fun things and that we had to buy food for cows. So if you have kids involved on the farm, this is a really cool opportunity for them to get interested in farming and in business. Then we've got the microloans option that I just talked about, the operating loans. These are for folks that are already in business and just need a rolling line of credit. things to purchase seeds, fertilizer, at the beginning of the season, and then you pay it back at the end of season. Farm ownership loans, this would be what the beginning farmer and rancher loan project or farmer and rancher loan would look like. Emergency loans, if you are in an area that's declared a disaster because of weather, you have access to lines of credit to recover from that emergency. And then guaranteed loans. So the way that guaranteed loans are is that if you are trying to get a line of credit from a commercial bank to purchase a farm and they're saying no, you can go to the USDA, show them your qualifications, talk to them, and in some cases the USDA can actually back that loan so that that commercial bank will lend it to you. So they're kind of a extra line of security, an extra signer on the loan, for example. Okay, so that is, startup capital. What I'm going to do, Amy, is I'm going to skip ahead to one of your spots, and then we'll jump back to finding new markets, if that's okay.
Yep. All right. So one of the questions that came in was where to find production resources. And the good news is that there's a lot of resources out there. Now, I don't have awesome transitions like Katelyn to draw your attention to each of the bullet points, but I'm going to kind of explain them one by one so that you kind of get an idea of what Cornell and some other universities in the region have to offer. So if you're looking for livestock information, the best place to start if you're in the Southwest New York region is the Southwest New York Dairy Livestock and Field Crops team. Katelyn and I are part of that team, and we also have two other specialists, a dairy specialist and a forage and field crop specialist, who are able to help with different aspects of farming. So because all of us on here are farming with the intent to earn a profit, you can go ahead and use our services. That link there will take you directly to our website as well as to our specialists' contact information. If you're outside of the Southwest New York region, you can go ahead and contact your local ag educator at your local extension office, and they'll be able to answer your questions most typically. And if they're not able to, they will put you in contact with somebody who will be able to. So when we take the different species and we break them down, I'm highlighting basically one link per species just because there are so many available, but I want to highlight some of the good work that Cornell is doing. The first one, for those of you who are interested in beef cattle, is the beef cattle management page found at that web address there. And the beef cattle management page has a lot of really cool stuff. It's currently being run by Dr. Mike Baker. He's going to be retiring shortly, but it will be taken over by somebody else in the livestock sector here at Cornell. And that page has a lot of information regarding market updates and general resources for cattle production and news stories and research articles. It's just got a whole lot of fun information on it. So that's definitely something to check out if you're interested in raising beef cattle. Now, if you're going to be into small ruminants, if you want some sheep or some goats, maybe some alpacas, since they typically go hand in hand as guard animals for sheep and goats, you can find more information on the Cornell Sheep and Goat Program page or on the Maryland Small Ruminant page. Both of those pages have different information and they're organized a little bit differently. So between the two, you'll be able to find information on general husbandry, health, things especially like worm loads and how to treat those, marketing and that sort of thing. So that's all included there. And then we don't have a poultry specific page here at Cornell. Our poultry department dissolved way back when a lot of other poultry departments in the United States dissolved. We do have some specialists around the state who work with poultry. So I want to draw your attention to the poultry extension page at Penn State. That's probably going to be your best resource in terms of schools on the Northeastern Seaboard that are going to be able to provide information that's applicable to what we're doing here in New York. If you're in another part of the country, let me know. I'm pretty well tuned into poultry and I can show you to the university that would have information that's most pertinent to you. But you'll find information there. Again, it's the same basic thing, general husbandry, health and well-being, production, and that sort of thing on those pages. Okay, so the next pages that I wanted to highlight were some that you all brought up. So floriculture, which is cut flowers. The Cornell cut flower crops page has a lot of the information that you need. And if you follow that link, what you'll find is a group of materials where they're broken out by plant species. So if you want to learn more about sunflowers, you can click on sunflowers. And that page will tell you all about cultural conditions, such as when you plant seed, when to harvest, what to look for in species selection, and that sort of thing. And it goes through all the different common cut flowers that we can grow here in New York State, which is really cool. For vegetables, we have quite a few resources on those, and all of those resources are housed in a hub under the Cornell Vegetable Program. The Cornell Vegetable Program works similarly to the Southwest New York team, where there's a team of specialists that each focus on a different aspect of vegetable production, and they are located in different areas across the state, but they all work together to share information and help producers who might have multiple crops on their farms. So if you go to that web link, you'll be able to find information on cultural conditions for growing these crops, options for cleaning and harvesting those crops if you plan on processing over a certain dollar amount of crops a year. Generally it's $25,000, and you have to work into FSMA and all that fun stuff. That's explained on that website. The specialists are also shared on that website. And if you subscribe to their group, what you'll be able to receive is updates from the team and their newsletter called Veg Edge, which is really fun. If you're interested in maple, the Cornell Maple Program is quite robust. This started in New York State, I believe in the early 2000s, and it's really skyrocketed from there. New York State, as many of you who are interested in maple know, is one of the top maple producing states in the nation, and we got there not by accident. And the resources on the Cornell Maple page will be able to kind of show you how to produce maple syrup in an economical way, an efficient way, while maintaining quality. Now, if you're interested in honey production and honeybees, the Pollinator Network at Cornell is the resource for you. The Cornell Pollinator Network, again, it's a lot of the same stuff, general husbandry techniques, and there's a beekeeping calendar on there, which is super handy for new beekeepers to tell you when to take care of bees and what treatments to use, when to use them, what's happening in your colonies, when to put supers on to get honey off, just all sorts of cool stuff. So take a look at these resources, and if you have any questions on anything that you find here, you can shoot a message over to me and I'll direct you to the person who might know more about that.
Thank you, Amy, especially on questions about honey. I can handle mammals, but Amy is the bee person. I give her a lot of credit.
Love them. They sting, but they're good girls.
Great. Thank you for flopping that order around, Amy. I appreciate it. Okay, so now we're going to jump back and talk about finding new markets. This is another question that came up a lot. So we kind of skipped past the marketing plan portion of business planning just in time's sake. So I'm going to give you a really quick overview of, let's say you didn't listen to my advice of getting a market before you grew a product, and now all of a sudden you have a product that you're trying to sell and no place to send it. What do? So the first thing to do is to really clearly define your target audience. This includes things like demographics, geography, lifestyle, values, their leisure activities, and their occupation. So when I ask farmers to say, okay, can you define what your market is, whether that's, or who your ideal customer is. So whether that's, the person at the sale barn that's buying for Empire Livestock, or if it's a specific, a mom with little tiny kids is coming to the farmer's market and is trying to purchase affordable vegetables to feed them. When I ask farmers this question, the answer I get the most is, well, I'm trying to sell to everybody. And that, my friends, is a cop-out answer. So the advantage of hyper-focusing on a specific type of customer is that you're still going to catch everyone. But you're going to have a niche, you're going to have an edge to try to figure out who's that customer, where do they shop, what are they looking for, and how can I meet their needs? So thinking about your specific customer, you're answering your question of who's going to buy my product, but then you're defining why are they going to buy my product? Is it because, I also am a mom with little kids and I'm farming and look at these connections we have? Is it because you're affordable? Is it because you are raising them in a way that that potential customer might really like? Or do you have a roadside stand where someone could come and pick up items for their dinner on the way home? So why are they going to pick your product over somebody else? And then what will they pay for my product? So going back to your specific consumer, your ideal target audience, what is their income level and how much money could they spend on that product? And then where do they expect to find this product? So again, is it the roadside stand by the farm? Is it a grocery store where you're bulk marketing your product off of one of their shelves? Is it through a CSA or at the farmer's market? Once you have asked yourself those questions, it's a little bit easier to pick new markets. So as far as market options for those of you who are new to farming, there's kind of this wholesale versus direct to consumer bucket. So a wholesale bucket, this includes, produce markets, livestock auctions. You're sending your product out. You don't know who's going to buy it. It's at a large scale. You're kind of getting a wholesale rate. Everything about milk sold through cooperatives. Large grains are sold through cooperatives on a wholesale market, commodity-based pricing. These are really tough markets to break into because it's tough you can't control your price, right? Like you're going to get whatever price you get, and you have to make sure you're managing the risks on your farm so you can still make a profit at that point. Once you move out of those wholesale markets, other market options for farms are farmers markets, obviously. Farmers markets are great. It's a great way to spend a Saturday, meet customers, but the profit margins are really low. On farm sales, this could be as simple as a self-service roadside stand all the way up to a come on the farm, come pet some goats. My extension agent told me to get liability insurance, so you're allowed to get out of your car. So they can be pretty elaborate on farm sales as well. This is easy from the point of view that you're not trying to truck product, but you have to be comfortable with having people on your farm. And a lot of times that's where we live and raise our families as well. Then there's an option for internet and mail order. Now you have to be careful about what you're selling and where you're selling it. So I'm not going to go into that because that's a whole nother 2-hour workshop, but this is an option. We're seeing more and more farms, especially with the pandemic, switching to an online ordering system, depending on what their product is and the ability to ship it. Then there's something called community supported agriculture, or a CSA. This is where your customer buys a share of that season's harvest up front and then receives that share later on. So it used to be just vegetables. So you would pay $500 to the farmer at the beginning of the season, get a box of vegetables every week for the rest of the summer. However, I'm starting to see this happen more with other products like meats, honey, maple syrup. So you kind of prepay for your product. So I'm going to prepay for a quarter of an animal. So it's not quite that same CSA model, but the advantage of it as the farmer is that you're getting your money up front to produce your product later on. Other options for new markets include restaurant sales. In our region out here in the middle of nowhere, this is a little bit harder, but it's completely doable if you've got the right personality and are a go-getter and have a product that's going to be unique. So you either have to be price competitive, which is tough, especially as a beginning farm or a small farm, or you have to be unique. So maybe you grow a super special kind of mushroom or a really unique vegetable that restaurants want to feature in a dish. So restaurant sales are an option for a new market. Sales to other food retailers. So I think I mentioned like a local grocery store, convenience store, a mom and pop smoke shop that maybe wants to sell beef jerky. Those are all food retailers that you have it as an option to sell your product. And then institutional food service sales. So these are things like schools, hospitals. We're seeing there's a lot of interest around serving locally grown foods in schools, and Amy's got more information on that if anybody's interested in pursuing that path. But this is an option, once you kind of get to a certain scale of size, is that you can sell your product to schools. And then this one is what I'm finding the most fun part about COVID, is that people have had some really great successes with a home delivery model. So kind of a return to the milkman, right? So People go online, they place their order, they send a message on Facebook, and then the farmer drives around and drops off a box of whatever you ordered. It's definitely not the price is a consideration because you do have to make a profit for all of your time managing that, but it is kind of just something fun and different in a new market that's definitely got a bigger opportunity now than it might have in the past. So in your slides that you're going to receive, this link guide to marketing channel selection goes through all of these different markets, as well as some techniques for trying to figure out which one's going to be the best fit for you and your production model. Some suggestions for trying to find a new market. The first one is network, network, network. And it doesn't mean that you're cold calling people trying to sell to them. You're cold calling people, asking them where they shop. What types of products do you want? What types of products do your friends want? Post things on social media. Call just, the terrifying words to me, call people. Ooh. Call people, text people, send people questionnaires. Talk to as many people as you possibly can and find out what they're looking for and how you might be able to supply that. The flip side of that, once you get ready to do your sales, network, network, network to let people know that you have things for sale that you're looking to get out the door. If you're trying to break into a new market, you could try to grow a new crop, something different, something unique, something that's going to help to make you a name, but try that on a small scale. So just because you can't market something that you have already set up your entire farm around doesn't mean you should quit and try something new, because you don't know if that something new is going to work too, which goes back to our whole conversation about risk management as far as what's our product management, our product spread. We have a diverse amount of enterprises on our farm so that if a market for one fails, we've got some backups for others. And then work on a full marketing plan. So a lot of you have shown interest in participating in our marketing planning workshop series. So we'll be offering that this fall. But if you want to get working on this before then, just let me know and we can send the curriculum over to you. Okay. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is farming as a retirement gig. So we're more and more we're seeing, I think about 15% on the last ag census, 15% of new beginning farmers were over the age of 65. So this is kind of that farming as a second career. A lot of times, you want to get away from your day job, you want to start a farm, your retirement age. It puts you in a completely different position, but kind of the same. So you might have some different resources and skills that someone else that's starting a farm might not, but you're still trying to do something new. So some special considerations for starting a farm as a retirement gig is really to consider it, look at it as a wise investment and look at it wisely. So farming is a good investment for the most part. If you think about beef cattle, for example, you buy one cow, that cow's going to double your investment in 2 years as soon as it has a calf. You buy land values are only skyrocketing. So even if the farm itself fails, as long as you've invested wisely, that land is still going to pay that investment back. So when you're thinking about farming in retirement, one of the biggest reasons to do that is to continue to cover / reduce your property taxes. So if you're receiving an ag value assessment, that land has to be a part of active agricultural production. It can significantly reduce your property taxes. Continuing to farm on that land is a way to keep your property taxes low in retirement. It also provides some income off of that land that you can use to cover your property taxes if other parts of your lifestyle, your budget, your household needs are covered through other means in retirement. The difference about thinking about farming as a retirement gig is that you're going to be thinking about it on a much more long-term goal cycle. So we're going to talk a little bit about the business cycle later tonight, but thinking about what do you want to happen to that farm when you can no longer farm it? So is it really just there to keep covering your property taxes and you don't really care what happens? Or do you have a younger generation or somebody else that is interested in buying that farm? So when you're thinking about farming as retirement, you just have to keep in mind what your long-term goals would be. And then The biggest step is to make a budget. So figure out how much money you need to live happily and comfortably in retirement and where that money is coming from. So do you have outside sources of income that you've saved? And how much money does the farm need to make up? And then once you have that number in mind, set a budget for your farm, do an enterprise analysis, figure out which direction you're going to go, and get started. Okay, so the next thing that people were asking for were for some real life enterprise analysis. So I'm going to show you an example. Okay, so we're going to go to Google. We're going to type in Penn State Ag Alternatives. And we are going to get a list of all of the different enterprise budgets that you could ever imagine. So Penn State Ag Alternatives is a fact sheet series that goes over different enterprises of agriculture. You might have heard me talk a little bit about this in the number 3 workshop. But the cool thing about them is that not only do they include technical production considerations, but they also include enterprise budgets. So in the interest of time, we're going to pick hops here. And you'll see that in this bulletin, fact sheet, whatever you want to call it, they talk about how to market it, site selection, designing the trellises, selecting varieties, irrigation, fertilities for the soil, cover crops, weed management, pest management, harvesting, environmental regulations, risk management, everything you need to know. But if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, and this is the same for all of the Penn State Ag Alternatives fact sheets, they have sample budgets. And the cool part about these budgets is that they use real numbers. So these aren't placeholder numbers. These are numbers that have been researched and are a good starting point. So what you do is when you find one of these bulletins, fact sheets that match what you're looking to analyze and get started in, it has a sample budget, which you saw in workshop number 3, but you are able to adjust it to meet your needs. So these numbers are all examples of maybe what you might need quantity wise for each of these options. So let's look at the actual hops plants, for example. So their estimate is, you need 1,600 hops plants. Well, if you say, I don't really want that large of a farm, or I don't want to jump in that big, I'm only going to get 200 plants. Okay. And then they give an estimate price. Now these prices are actually based on average prices. So they're not just placeholders. So these are numbers that you can use in your budgets. But let's say because I'm only buying 200 plants, I'm not going to get that low of a price. So it might be $6 per plant for me. Type that in, and it'll give me an estimate budget. So I can go through and edit each of these with kind of a basis of what that price might be and make my own enterprise budget. We'll take a look at one more, just so you can see. This is definitely like my favorite, one of my favorite websites to get information about enterprise budgets. So let's go to a beef cow calf production. As you can see, again, it's got everything you need to know, but then you can click on sample budget worksheet. Scroll down to the budget. And again, so it's giving you an example. If you were to sell steers at 550 pounds and heifers at 525 pounds for a hay pasture-based program. So what I can do is I can go in and say, I'm not going to sell 248 steers. I'm only going to sell 10. And my price, I'm going to sell them directly to my customer, and I'm going to set that price at $2 a pound. Okay, well, there's my, well, that was silly. Let's try again here. There we go. That's my estimated income. And then we're going to look at feed. So pasture maintenance. Okay. Yeah. You know, I'm going to maybe do a little bit more pasture than they are. But I'm not going to have any soybean meal. So I'm going to keep that as 0. And then you can see that they've estimated for fixed costs. So labor. Remember, we talked about how you normally don't give yourself a paycheck, but you probably should. Replacement costs for bulls, buildings, insurance, depreciation. So you can go through and play with all of these numbers. And what I'll tell you, if you're overwhelmed looking at this, there's no way I can guess these numbers. I still need help. That's what people like me are here for. So we'll sit down with you and go through a real life enterprise analysis. Okay. So to answer some more questions about this, where do you get your numbers from? Extension is a great resource. So we just went through Penn State's Ag Alternatives. Oregon's got some really great ones. Iowa's got some really great ones. You can go online and search for, let's say you want to grow lavender. Search lavender enterprise budget extension, and it'll only pull up extension-based resources. And it's really easy to find enterprise budgets that way. You can get other numbers from online farm suppliers. So you know, there's a company called Farm Tech, for example. So if you want to know how much it's going to cost you in black plastic to grow peppers, you can go onto that website and get an estimate for that. Local farm suppliers. So call up your local farm store, stop for a visit, tell them what you're thinking about doing, and have them run you some price projections or budgets. And then the other thing is just your own best guess. So a lot of things like portion of fixed costs, so like buildings, you don't really know what those prices are going to be until you get going, but your best guess is a really good placeholder. So enterprise budgets, enterprise analysis really isn't meant to be, this is exactly what's going to happen. It's meant to be, this is what could happen. Okay, Amy, we're going to turn it over to you.
All right. So jumping back to livestock, we had a question about silvopasture. And for those who aren't familiar with silvopasture, what it is essentially an intersection of woods and livestock. Typically, we'll graze livestock in open pastures because that's where grass grows best. But there is an increasing body of research indicating that grazing livestock in a pasture setting can benefit both the pasture species, the woody species of that pasture, typically trees, and also the animals that are in the pasture. It can provide things like shade to livestock that are susceptible to heat stress, such as dairy cattle or beef cattle. And it can help you expand the amount of land that you're grazing on. There are a lot of properties that you can either, if you have a property like this or you're looking to buy a property, there's a lot that are partially wooded and partially open. And so silvopasture gives you the option of utilizing that wooded space of your land in another type of capacity. So we can do things like raise forest crops, maybe mushrooms in the woods, maple sap, but we can also raise livestock. So one of the challenges, I should back up and I should say, silvopasture is really great and really exciting in a new field, but it doesn't come without its challenges. And that's because we're taking a system that has been probably previously to introducing livestock, a truly forested system where you've got trees, underbrush, and then you've got maybe some weeds growing in there, not necessarily a pasture stand. And the challenge is to take that and convert it over so that you have a canopy that allows enough light to filter through so that you have the ability for grass to grow. This takes time. It takes many, many years. And most of the time, hiring a forester or having an extension forester come out to take a look at the woods before you do anything to it is a good idea to give you a concept of how you can structure a silvopasture. So it does take intensive management as well. When you're running livestock in it, you can only run livestock for a couple of days. Typically, you can only run certain kinds of livestock at certain times. So for instance, if you have pigs that you want to run in the woods and you're working on developing a silvopasture, those pigs shouldn't stay there for very long because they will dig up everything that you own and love, because that's what pigs do. So that versus something like maybe goats. Goats will eat a lot of underbrush. So if you want to keep your understory intact, maybe you can only graze that twice a year, for instance. So it does take more intensive management. It is a challenge, but if you're up to the challenge, it can be a rewarding experience. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so Cornell actually was at the forefront of a lot of the silvopasture research that's out there, and you can find the results of that research and other articles to aid in your development of silvopasture at that website. That website has multiple articles on it, things like assessing your site, creating quality silvopastures for your livestock. It has quite a few articles on goats and underbrush management, economic viability, sustainability of these systems, and more. So definitely something to look at if you're interested in silvopasture.
Okay,
That's you.
There we go. All right, so now we're going to talk more record keeping, which I know is everybody's favorite topic. So I'm going to talk about the boring records, and then Amy's going to talk about the fun records. So boring records, things that are related to capital items like land, building, and equipment. So let's say you purchase a tractor and then you sell a tractor, or you purchase land and then you sell the land, or you keep the land. The general recommendation is that you keep a hold of all of those records, especially from larger capital purchases like land and large buildings, forever. So the reason for this being is that, let's say, there was a dispute over whether or not that land was sold. The paper trail goes dry, XYZ. Like if you have the paper to back that up, you're going to be much better off. And especially when it comes to land, the original paper copies. So not a scan that you're storing onto a computer that could get wiped, or on the cloud that could get hacked or lost, like the original hard copies. As far as keeping records for leases, rental agreements, things like that, the recommendation for those is just to hold on to those to the end of their term plus 1 season. So if there's ever an issue about renewing them, what were the end terms, you still have that available. Okay. And then for employment records, the recommendation for that is 4 years. And then the fun tax records. So the recommendation is to keep your taxes for 3 years. And I'll actually show you what the IRS language is on the next slide. That's the IRS recommendation. My recommendation is to keep the actual returns. So not the receipts and incomes, the receipts and sales slips and everything, but the actual return that you get from your tax preparer forever. The reason for this being is that you want to be able to prove to people that you have always paid your taxes on time, and here's my record. Keep them in a fireproof box, a safe someplace. They're going to collect dust and they're going to be there forever, but keep them. The other advantage of that is that it does provide a retrospective way to kind of get a financial picture of the farm, especially if you're not great at keeping records. Those tax returns will give you at least a base documentation of what the farm financials look like. So again, my recommendation is to keep your tax returns forever. It doesn't have to be all of the supporting documents and receipts, just the actual tax return itself. Okay, but my recommendation aside, this is what the IRS says. The reason that I show this is just because it makes me giggle a little bit. If any of you are thinking about filing a fraudulent return, you should keep your records about that fraudulent return forever. So what this is basically saying is that the IRS, if they suspect that you have filed a fraudulent return, they can go back to call you on it to investigate. Same thing, if you didn't file a return, you should keep the records of you not filing a return forever, because they could always come back and say, hey, you didn't file a return this year. What's going on? Where's your records? The other thing that makes me giggle about this is that they very specifically state out that you should keep your records for 6 years if you do not report income that you should report, and it is more than 25% of the gross income shown on your return. So I guess that, you know, if you're not reporting income that you should, and you make it past that 7 years, you're good to go. So as you can see, it's kind of, it's a lot of gray area, which is kind of why my new recommendation to folks is just keep that tax return forever, because then you can always have that to go back on. But as you can see, the IRS says keep records for 3 years if these situations don't apply to you. Okay, Amy, you get to talk about fun records.
I do. So these are on-farm records that are a little more fun to keep because they are directly related to the crops or livestock that you're producing. And I'm going to break this down by livestock, and the next slide is going to have crops. So the first thing that you want to keep track of is livestock sources. Where are you getting them from? Because there are some farm operations such as poultry. Just say you want to hatch and sell poultry and you want to be NPIP certified, you need to have record of where all those birds came from. Same thing if you want to have a clean herd, for instance. There's a couple of diseases within goat, sheep, and cattle herds which can be tested out of them. So if you purchase an animal from a disease-free herd, having where that animal was purchased as well as a copy of that disease-free status is going to do you well in your favor. And then it also allows you evidence that if that animal does come down with the disease that that farm was said to be free from, you can then follow that back and let the owner know. Birth and hatch dates are really important. This might not be so important for livestock that have a really short life, things like quail or rabbits, or turkeys or something like that. But it's really, really important for things like cattle and sheep and those larger animals, because by keeping records of birth and that sort of thing, what you're able to keep track of also is age of that animal. So if you're going to breed that animal, you know exactly how old they are. And if you're going to sell that animal, just say that animal is registered, then you'll also have an indication of when that birth date was. Registration papers are also important, both for the livestock that you register on your own farm and animals that you purchase from another farm that are registered. So if you want to continue, just say you buy a registered Angus bull and you're breeding him to a registered Angus cow, you want to make sure you have those records that you can prove to buyers who buy the calves out of your mating that they are indeed registered animals. Disease status and veterinary certificates are important, like I mentioned before, but especially if you're buying animals from other states and bringing them in. If you're bringing animals in from out of state, they will need a veterinary inspection just to make sure that everything is on the straight and narrow and that they're not bringing disease into New York State that we don't want here. So having that veterinary certificate on hand as evidence that you have indeed seen a veterinarian, the animal is certified to cross state lines. You should have that in your vehicle when you're transporting the animal across state lines. In the case that you're ever stopped and somebody asks you, what are you doing with this horse? You can say, well, she's been certified by the veterinarian and we're going here. So that's just a protection for you. And the receipt for animals is also important. There are a lot of folks that will buy live animals. It's a good idea to give them receipts and also keep that receipt for yourself, so that if a question ever comes up as to who the animal belongs to, you can verify that indeed it is either yours or somebody else's. Antibiotic, vaccine, and pesticide use, and by pesticides I mean typically pour over insecticides. I've kind of lumped them together, but generally speaking, you should always track when you're administering these to either individual animals or animal groups, because there are some that have withdrawal times. So if you're going to take an animal to slaughter and you treat it with an antibiotic, you need to make sure that animal is out of that withdrawal period prior to taking it to slaughter, or your meat is contaminated with antibiotic residue essentially, or vaccine residue. So just making sure that you are keeping track of those vaccinations and also the withdrawal times is really important. And for vaccines, another important thing is to note where they are given. Sometimes vaccines can cause cross reactions if they're given in the same spot. So if you are the one who's giving vaccines to your animals under your veterinarian's supervision, you should document where those vaccines go so that you don't cause a lump or bump in the animal as a reaction. Production values are also good to record. They're sometimes a pain to record, but they're a really good idea. So such things like weights, They're pretty easy to get if you have a scale in your chute, for instance. If you have large livestock, you can keep track of how much feed they're consuming, what their weight is, and therefore what their average daily gain is. And that will help you in your profit loss statements to determine whether or not your feeding program is profitable for the animals that you are producing. Another thing you could keep track of is the number of offspring an animal has. This is especially important for animals that we want to have doubles or triplets, such as sheep and goats. Typically, we'll select animals based on whether or not they can throw twins or triplets. We might select against them if they birth singlets, or against them if they birth quads, so 4 babies. So keeping track of the number of offspring, especially if you have a larger number of animals, is going to help you make management decisions. And then of course, any defects. So just say you have a cow that chronically gets mastitis, or you have chickens that don't breed properly or something like that. By noting those defects, when sale time comes around, or when it's time to take those animals to their final ride, you can choose animals that are going to be most appropriate to get off your farm and improve the genetics on farm. As I mentioned before, we want to have sales receipts. Again, it's to whom, what the prices were, and the quantity. And I'm going to say this a little bit quick because we're getting towards the end of our time here, but that's essentially to help you with your enterprise budget, and of course, any expenses that you may incur as part of your farming opportunity. It's very similar with crops. You want to identify where you're sourcing stock. Your rotations and plantings are going to be really important here. So there are a lot of vegetable crops that have diseases that are specific to that family of crops, such as clubroot in your cole crops, such as your cabbage and your broccoli and things. Having a diagram of where those plants have been planted and rotating out where they're planted every year is helpful for disease management. Pesticide and herbicide use, same thing. When you apply, sorry about that. When you apply, how much you apply, and where you're applying it is good records to keep, especially if you are going the organic route, or if you are maintaining your certified applicator's license in New York State for those pesticides which require you to be registered with the state to apply. And again, production value, sales, and any expenses incurred.
Great, thank you. So we're gonna skip ahead in the interest of time to, Amy's got some really great, everything you need to know about organic production and links in here. So all of this are gonna be in the slides that you all receive. But what I wanted to try to kind of end tonight with is a to-do list to get started. So this is something that a lot of people were asking for, like, where's a list that says, if I do these things, I'm now a farm. So here's your list. So my recommendation for you as you're getting started is to practice growing things and see what you actually like to do. From there, outline your business plan. So go back to webinar number 2, just kind of rough sketch your business plan, decide on a business structure, decide which direction you're going to head in. Then go ahead and file that DBA. If you're going the LLC route, file that, and double check to make sure whatever name you're thinking about using for your farm under that DBA isn't already taken. So, you know, you can reserve a website, even if you don't actually think you're going to use it, you can still reserve that name, your email name, social media handles, same thing. Even if you don't think you're going to use them, you can still reserve them and check to make sure nobody else has that name. Then get a separate checking account in which you're going to keep track of all of your expenses and incomes for that farm. Work with an accountant to identify what types of expenses and incomes he or she is going to want you to track in what way. Head down to the Farm Service Agency office to get registered with them so that you can receive information about potential funding opportunities and support. Get farm insurance and product liability insurance. Fill in your business plan that you kind of sketched out and start farming. So that's the to-do list. And then file your taxes accordingly. Once you do these things, we can declare you an official farm. So in conclusion for tonight, oh, this is what happens when you reuse slides, guys. There we go. Okay. So, I think we're getting there. Did we get it? We got it. Tonight has been the night of all the tech issues. So we still have somebody that's been trying to get on that hasn't been able to get on to the Zoom link. So the recording is going to be sent out. Thank you guys for going through with all of those. So in conclusion, what I wanted to say again is that the follow-up survey is going to be coming out at the end of this webinar, as well as tomorrow. Everyone will be getting an email where all of the centralized recordings and slides are going to be held, and the survey. So please fill out that survey open and honestly, and we're going to pick 3 people that are going to get $10 Tim Hortons gift cards. So Amy and I might be padding the responses, you know, just making up names and throwing our hats in the ring there. So please fill that out once you get that. And at this point, if anybody has any questions, go ahead and ask them. I know a lot of people have been enjoying the reflection time to go back through and rewatch the video. And then I check my email the next morning and I've got 10 questions. So that's great. And I'm glad that everybody feels comfortable, you know, thinking through this information and reflecting on how it applies to their own farm. That's what Amy and I are here for. So pending any questions, what we'll do is we will end this webinar. I'll share out the recording and everything, and we will go forth. So one of the questions is actually on the follow-up survey is whether or not you want to receive notification about other classes like this, because this has definitely generated a lot of ideas for us for some new programs, new workshops, new trainings to offer everybody. All right, looks like everybody's good. So we are going to go ahead and end the webinar. And thank you all for joining us for our Farm Business Foundation series. We appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.